If only Donald Trump tackled gun violence, the deficit, or pediatric cancer with the same zeal he's displayed in proving that he was right all along about his claims that Alabama was in the path of Hurricane Dorian, a forecast so off base the National Weather Service corrected the president immediately. And today, as Hurricane Dorian continues to threaten life and property, Donald Trump is still at it. His Alabama tweet count today stands at 4, but those numbers are expected to rise as Donald Trump surveys the damage to his reputation, which now includes sharing a false weather forecast and doubling down on it. The New York Times describes this morning's developments this way, quote, by Thursday morning, it was clear that Mr. Trump had no intention of conceding that he was wrong about Alabama. In a tweet at 6:39 a.m., the president accused the media of not giving him the credit he deserves. Former FBI Director Jim Comey put the president's conduct like this, quote, Americans are in harm's way, and the president is laser focused on covering up a small mistake he made. Narcissism is not leadership. America deserves better. The Sharpie debacle is part of a pattern of two dangerous Trump phenomena, lying and doubling down. Washington Post is out with a piece today chronicling other low points in the Trump administration's war on truth. It began on day one of his presidency when Trump sent his press secretary out to defend his false claims about his inaugural crowd size.
This was the largest audience to ever witness an inauguration, period, both in person and around the globe.
That was how Trump's post-truth presidency started, and his administration would later go on to tweet out doctored video in order to support Trump's punishment of a journalist and convene a commission to back up Trump's baseless claims that widespread voter fraud in the 2016 election cost him the popular vote. The credibility crisis forces another uncomfortable conversation, though, and it's one that's mostly been whispered, except in a few rare instances.
The president has not yet been able to demonstrate the stability nor some of the competence that he needs to demonstrate in order to be successful.
Reckless, outrageous, and undignified behavior has become excused and countenanced as telling it like it is, when it is actually just reckless, outrageous, and undignified. And when such behavior emanates from the top of our government, it is something else. It is dangerous to a democracy.
Dangerous to a democracy is where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Former Democratic Congresswoman Donna Edwards joins us. Former Assistant Director for Counterintelligence at the FBI, Frank Figliuzzi's back. With us from the New York Times, Chief White House Correspondent Peter Baker. At the table, Rick Stengel, former Managing Editor at Time Magazine, who worked in President Obama's State Department, plus Executive Editor for Bloomberg Opinion, Tim O'Brien. Tim, I'm going to start with you because you've been chronicling Donald Trump the liar longer than all of us put together. But I think as someone who worked in a White House, as someone who worked in the State Department, there are still moments, like the president holding up a doctored image of a storm path, that continue to rattle and shake what's left of our norms.
You know, I don't think it's just about lying. Lying is an outcome of other things that trouble the President of the United States. For all of his bluster, he's a deeply insecure man, and there are certain things that trigger him around that. His wealth, his intelligence, and on and on. And what happened, I think, with Alabama is he made a mistake that another person might have made, and had he been secure and had he been confident in who he is, he would have simply said, I'm sorry, I wish well for the people of Alabama, let's move on, I made a mistake. But then ABC called him out on it, and he doubled down. And he got into this tug of war that has happened across a whole range of subjects for 70 of the last 73 years of his life, which is, I'm right and you're wrong. And the reason he can't let go of that is because inside of himself, Donald Trump knows that he's not competent. He knows that he is not informed. He's aware that he's an ignorant person. And what's happening now is he's on an international stage. He's never occupied the spotlight in quite this way. And everything that's led up to this moment, we've talked about this before, the way he's been insulated in the past from the consequences of his own mistakes, first by wealth, then by celebrity, now by the presidency. He's never had to learn how to analyze himself and grow. And instead what he does is he simply digs in. And I think there's been a sort of a range of issues that we've seen already that doesn't let go. Comey came up in the midst of all this. I think Jim Comey's wrong when he says it's narcissism. I think this is more about insecurity and a troubled psychology.
And not one of us is capable of diagnosing anybody. Peter Baker, your colleague Annie Carney was on this show this hour yesterday as this story was beginning to break open. And she mentioned some of the small things he lies about. The president saying that he never called Tim Cook Tim Apple when he had done exactly that on tape. We looked back at an interview we did with Rick Riley. He wrote a book about Trump, Who Lies and Cheats, about golf. But I know for your body of journalism, not just in your current capacity, but you've covered, you've been in Moscow, you've covered the Middle East. And I think more alarming than false statements about the weather and the size of his crowds are Trump's false claims about our adversaries that contradict U.S. intelligence. His claim after meeting Kim Jong-un that there's, quote, no longer a nuclear threat from North Korea, a claim that didn't age well after North Korea fired off a series of missile tests just in the last few months. Claims Trump dismissed then as very standard, even as his intelligence officials expressed alarm. There was also the killing of Washington Post reporter Jamal Khashoggi. Trump's CIA blamed Saudi Arabia's crown prince. Trump allegedly gave him a pass.
We are going to leave nothing uncovered. With that being said, the king firmly denied any knowledge of it. He didn't really know. Maybe, I don't want to get into his mind, but it sounded to me like maybe these could have been rogue killers. Who knows? We're going to try getting to the bottom of it very soon. But his was a flat denial.
And finally, the break with reality heard around the world. Trump's acceptance of Vladimir Putin's denial that Russia interfered in our election.
They said they think it's Russia. I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this. I don't see any reason why it would be. I have great confidence in my intelligence people, but I will tell you that President Putin was extremely strong and powerful in his denial today.
Peter Baker.
Well, look, every president to some extent creates a narrative for their, political career, for their presidency, something to explain themselves to people. But
President Obama.
wait a second. No. What I'm going to say is, let me finish. Sorry, what I was going to say is, you don't see with any other president is one whose narrative is so impervious to outside facts, right? This is what Donald Trump does is he creates his own reality. In fact, Anthony Scaramucci, before he broke with President Trump, when he was still a supporter of President Trump, said that he creates this reality distortion field around him. He bends reality to suit his own needs, his own desires, his own his own points of view. So if other people say Alabama's not in the storm range, and he said it is, it's going to be in the storm range as long as he has anything to say about it. You played several of the other examples where he's not willing to listen to other people's analysis, other people's facts, other people's information, because he's already decided in his own mind what he wants the story to be, and it's impervious to those sort of outside opinions. Very rarely do you see him ever back off. I was really stunned at one just about a week or so ago. The only time I can remember in recent months where the president actually backed off. He said that Melania Trump knew Kim Jong-un well and thought really highly of him. The White House was forced to put out a statement saying, well, actually, she hadn't even met him. But he felt that she knew him. That was the statement. He felt that she knew him, and that justified his statement. And that's how President Trump operates. If he feels like something is true, then it's true. Tim O'Brien knows this better than anybody, right, Tim? In the depositions for your lawsuit, he said he felt his worth was higher than Tim reported in his book, and that the fact that he felt that way made it so.
Tim, Peter's right. And listen, I think that the value of people that have been around other administrations is the capacity to compare Trump to that which is normal. But I wonder if that's the wrong exercise with Trump. I wonder if we should be comparing him to other people who are delusional instead of other presidents who were normal.
Yeah, I don't think you can compare him to another president in the modern era. Peter brought up the lawsuit. The interesting thing about that lawsuit is he sued me on things that I could demonstrably prove to be correct, and they were. And it wasn't in his strategic interest to sue a New York Times reporter that was going to get free legal representation from the newspaper. And my book publisher gave me representation as well.
Yeah, we had your general counsel
we were all on here
the show,
together. Yeah. And the thing about Trump is, Liz Smith, a New York gossip columnist, once said to me, she was from Texas, and she said, honey, the only thing you need to know about Donald Trump is that he's a 7-year-old who never grew old. And that's a pretty good working way to understand where he's coming from. Because kids, when they get into a fight, don't think about what's good in the long term. How should they constructively work their way out of this to get to a good resolution? What he thinks is, there's this thing in front of me now, I don't like it, I'm going to strangle it to the ground, even if it's not in my self-interest to do this. And that's why he keeps doubling down on this bonkers claims about Alabama.
So, Frank Figliuzzi, what I keep thinking about when we see the president with his hand on an image doctored by a black Sharpie so that was a lie that was brought to light because the president held it. All the things that he does on tape are lies that we know about because he does them on tape. What do you think the sort of scope of the iceberg is underwater? What is happening behind the scenes?
So to understand how dangerous this could become, and may have already become, I think, Nicole, it's important to view the lies through the proper lens. Trump is lying not because the truth is inconsistent with how we view him, but rather the truth is inconsistent with how he wants to be viewed and how he wishes things were. So he is manufacturing an illusion. And the illusion on the national security side is simply that we have no serious adversaries. Everything is fine. Nothing to see here. I'm the savior of the world, kind of a demigod, not unlike Kim Jong-un. I've got things under control. And anything contrary to that is a problem. So how would that manifest itself, as you say, kind of below the surface on the national security realm and with our allies? I'll give you a quick anecdote. I bought a house one time in a great neighborhood. I did my homework, and I noticed quickly after I moved in that nobody was locking their doors. People were leaving their cars unlocked, front doors, scooters, bikes, mopeds, all out on the lawns. And when I started asking people why, they said, we don't have a crime problem here. Everything's fine here. This is an incredibly safe street. Never had a problem. Within a short amount of time, the bad guys who had been robbing homes and breaking into cars and a few streets away realized there's a street where no one locks their doors. And they took advantage of that. And things started disappearing out of garages and out of cars. What's my point? Our adversaries are looking at this right now. And they're saying, no one's locking their doors at the United States. The president thinks there's no problem. He's projecting this illusion of no problem. North Korea's a friend. Russia's a friend. All good. Saudi crown prince didn't kill anybody. When that happens, you get exploited, and the truth bites you in the rear end, and it hurts badly.
And Donna Edwards, there is a truth that hurts pretty badly, I'm told, when the president focuses on it. This is from Peter's colleague Michael Crowley, who writes in today's New York Times, President Trump heads into the closing months of the year before he faces re-election without a clear policy agenda and with an uphill path to achieving any major new accomplishments before he faces voters. And as official Washington returns to work, it is unclear whether Mr. Trump intends to focus his time and attention on his policy goals or whether he will step into a full-bore campaign mode, escalating attacks on his political rivals and spurning traditional governance. What's your money on, Donna?
Well, look, I'm not spending my money on Donald Trump, but if this week is any indication of where the president is headed, he is going to continue to be in this muck of made-up stories that are the result of his incompetence or his ego or his incoherence. And so I think that Going into as Congress comes back into session, there are some real things that have to be done. But some of the things that could have been on the president's agenda, like lowering prescription drug costs, rebuilding the nation's infrastructure, all of those things are set aside because the president isn't able to focus really for 30 seconds on something that's really important to the American people. And when I look at this incident with Alabama, what I see is a president who sometimes lies because it's inconvenient and doesn't match his truth. But sometimes these lies actually have real consequences. Alabama could have, if they paid attention to the president, might have started moving resources. People get afraid. They're calling their friends and family in the Carolinas and along the coast to make sure that they're okay. And so we shouldn't just dismiss these things as though they are not important. And I want to laugh at the Sharpie, too. But unfortunately for the American people, the time for this president and for laughing is really over. And I don't see him accomplishing anything from now until the end of this next part of the congressional session.
Rick.
Yeah, there's a lot to process here. I have to say I agree with Donna. I mean, in the sense the Sharpie gate is sort of comical. When you told that Liz Smith story, it made me think of Harold and the Purple Crayon, the 4-year-old boy who created his own reality with a purple crayon. That's essentially what Donald Trump does. But what Frank was saying also is this idea that when the president of the United States does not tell the truth, is not beholden to the truth, that gives permission to world leaders all over the planet, particularly authoritarians, to not tell the truth. When the president of the United States' word is gold, the way we used to parse every word and sentence that a president of the United States used to say.
Their spokespeople.
And their spokespeople. It held people to a higher standard. In fact, my whole book is about disinformation. Donald Trump is the disinformationist in chief. He is the leading cause of disinformation coming from one person on a global stage. It's really incredible, and it influences every place down, and it makes the truth something that people question. The other point about what the Russians do is not so much that they want you to believe what they're saying. They want you to disbelieve everybody else, and that's what Trump does, too.
All right, so we're joined now by my friend Al Roker. I have to say, Al, you were on to this story because it started as a weather story. This did not start as a Trump story or a political story. It started as something that alarmed you because it was bad information about the storm.
Yeah, and that was the problem. It was one of these things where you saw it, and I remember looking and seeing a picture of him being briefed with the actual graphic, in the White House on the 29th. It was there. And then to see that, it was like, wait. But the fact of the matter is, I think, look, whatever you want to say about what he did or didn't do, the fact is people go to what they consider their trusted sources. The National Weather Service from Alabama came out and said, no, this is not a problem. So they knew where to go. I don't think people made decisions based on what the president said. And
let's hope not, because just now he has tweeted for the 5th time today. We had hoped to move on to cover the storm, to cover the weather, to cover people in harm's way. But he has, since we've been on the air, tweeted a 5th time today about Alabama. So how about some real news? Well, here's the deal. And this is it's an interesting storm in that it's been very slow moving. And it's given, the good news is it's given people time to prepare. Unfortunately, for our friends in the Bahamas, things sat on top of them for 51 hours. But this now is starting to pick up speed. It's a Category 2 storm, 55 miles south-southeast of Myrtle Beach, 110 miles per hour, still a very strong Category 2. It's moving north-northeast at 8. And what we talked about, Nicole, yesterday at this time, we were worried about tornadoes. Well, we now have tornado watches and tornado warnings going on, not just along the coast, but inland as well. So, as we told you, just because you don't live on the coast, do not think that you are out of the woods, because this is still a powerful storm that is going to be affecting this area for the next 24 hours. Here's the track right now. It takes it along the coast, may have a landfall late tonight, early tomorrow along Wilmington, and then maybe Morehead City, possibly Cape Hatteras by Friday morning. Still a Category 2, 100-mile-per-hour winds. Then it rockets off, moves off the coast by Friday, and we are still
talking about it. There are tropical storm watches for New England. So we could see some wet weather, some very heavy winds, and strong storm surge. In fact, Myrtle Beach today, wind gust of up to 85 miles per hour. We've already seen some sustained wind gusts of 100 miles per hour. A storm surge, 5 to 8 feet. Rainfall, 10 to 15 inches. The storm continues making its way up the coast, and then Wilmington tonight and into tomorrow morning, your winds 60 to 95 miles per hour, a storm surge of 4 to 7 feet, rainfall 8 to 12 inches. And then for Cape Hatteras, early Friday morning, we may see landfall there. And then it continues to make its way to the northeast. And look at this, late Friday into Saturday, Long Island, Cape Cod, 35 to 55 mile per hour winds, periods of heavy rain and minor coastal flooding. But the big deal still, Nicole, is we've got storm surge, which is where you have the preponderance of deaths. We've got tornadoes to worry about as this makes its way up the coast. And the dangerous thing about these tornadoes, they're rain wrapped. It's going to be at night. People will not see them. They'll spin up very quickly. So it is a powerful storm, and it is people still need to pay heed to their local officials, those folks that they trust to give them the right information, and they need to worry about coastal flooding as well. So it's just a Category 2, but there can be a lot of damage done with that.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.